I never thought a simple parent-teacher meeting would change my life. But there I was, sitting across from a man who made me feel something I hadn't felt in years. It started with a look, a glance that lasted a second too long, a handshake that sent a warmth up my arm, something electric, something forbidden. His voice was deep, smooth, confident. When he said my name, Juliet, it was like he had known me forever. That was the moment everything shifted. Before I take you deeper into this story, I need you to do one thing. If you've ever had a moment in life that made your heart race, a moment that made you question everything, like this video and subscribe for more real-life confessions. Because this one, it's only getting started. I had been married to Mark for 10 years. Our life was predictable: work, home, dinner, sleep, repeat. We had a beautiful daughter, Emily, who was the only spark in our otherwise dull routine. Mark was a good man, but he had stopped seeing me. I wasn't Juliet anymore. I was just Mom or Honey. So when I walked into that classroom for Emily's parent-teacher meeting and met Mr. Ethan Carter, I wasn't prepared for what I felt. He was different. Younger than I expected, maybe in his late 30s, yet with the kind of confidence that made a woman pay attention. Tall, broad shoulders, deep brown eyes that locked onto mine like they were reading something hidden inside me. "Mrs. Adams, it's a pleasure to finally meet you," he said, standing as I entered. His handshake was firm, but his fingers lingered just long enough to make my breath catch. Pleasure, that word. I hadn't thought about pleasure in a long time. We started talking about Emily, her progress, her strengths, her struggles. But it didn't take long for the conversation to drift. "You have a very bright daughter," he said, his voice warm. "She's confident, quick-witted. I wonder where she gets that from." I laughed, maybe too quickly. "Oh, definitely from her father. He's a strong, disciplined one." Ethan tilted his head, studying me. "And you?" I wasn't expecting the question. It was just small talk, harmless, but something in the way he asked it made me feel seen. I guess I used to be adventurous," I admitted, "before motherhood took over." "Ah," he nodded. "So the adventure is still there, just waiting." My stomach flipped. There was something about the way he said it, the way his gaze lingered, as if he could see beyond the surface. For the first time in years, I felt alive. The meeting should have ended there. A polite thank you, a handshake, a goodbye. But neither of us moved. The air between us was thick, not inappropriate, not yet, but loaded with something unspoken. "I hope you don't mind me saying this," he said finally, "but I can tell you're someone who deserves to be appreciated." I blinked, my heart racing. Thank you," I said, trying to sound normal, but my voice was shaky. He smiled, slow, knowing. "Emily is lucky to have you," he said. "She's going to do well, not just because of her intelligence, but because of the way you support her." I swallowed hard. That means a lot. I needed to leave, right then. But as I stood up, so did he. And for a second, we were too close. Close enough for me to catch the faint scent of his cologne. Close enough for my body to react before my mind could remind me I was married. He walked me to the door. "I'll see you around, Mrs. Adams." I hesitated before stepping out. Did he feel it too? I didn't know then, but that moment, that charged, silent exchange, was only the beginning. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to push away thoughts of Mr. Ethan Carter. It should have been just another parent-teacher meeting, a polite conversation, a simple exchange of words. But why did it feel like something more? I glanced at Mark, my husband, lying beside me, snoring softly. The distance between us felt bigger than ever. We used to stay up late talking, laughing about nonsense, but now we barely spoke beyond, "What's for dinner?" and "Did you pay the bills?" I turned to my side, shutting my eyes tight. It was just a meeting, Juliet, just a conversation. But I knew I was lying to myself. The next day, as I dropped Emily off at school, I caught sight of Ethan through the classroom window. He was standing at his desk, explaining something to a student, his sleeves rolled up, revealing strong-toned arms. I hesitated for a second. Should I go in? Say hello? That would be ridiculous. What excuse would I even have? But as I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Ethan, good morning, Mrs. Adams. I hope you and Emily are having a great day. My breath hitched. I hadn't given him my number, had I? Then I remembered. I had filled out my contact details on a school form. He must have taken it from there. A thrill shot through me. Was this inappropriate? I should have ignored it. But instead, I typed back, me. Good morning, Mr. Carter. That's very thoughtful of you. We're doing well, thank you. His reply came almost instantly. Ethan. You can call me Ethan. Mr. Carter makes me sound ancient. I smiled at the screen. Me. All right, Ethan. Only if you call me Juliet. The moment I hit send, my heart pounded. This wasn't flirting. Not really. Just a friendly exchange, right? Days passed, and our conversations continued. First about Emily, her schoolwork, her strengths. But soon, the messages became more personal. He asked about my interests, my past, what I did for fun. And for the first time in years, I found myself wanting to share. Then one morning, he sent a simple message. Ethan, how about coffee? Just a friendly chat, outside the school walls. I stared at the message for a long time. Saying yes felt dangerous. Saying no felt impossible. So I found myself replying. Me. Okay, just coffee. We met at a small cafe across town, one that none of the school parents would go to. As soon as I walked in, I saw him, sitting by the window, a coffee in front of him, waiting for me. He smiled when he saw me, standing up slightly as I approached. Juliet! My name sounded different in his voice. We talked for what felt like minutes, but turned into hours. He asked about my life, my dreams, my regrets. No one had asked me those things in years. And then, somewhere between the laughter and the stolen glances, his hand brushed against mine. It was innocent, barely a touch, but it was enough. My skin burned where he had touched it. The air between us changed. We both knew what was happening, and neither of us stopped it. That night, I sat in my car outside my house, gripping the steering wheel, replaying the coffee meeting in my head. I hadn't done anything wrong, not really. But then why did my body hum with anticipation? Why did I feel like a woman who had just stepped too close to the edge of a cliff? When I walked inside, Mark barely looked up from his laptop. Hey, he muttered. Everything okay? I nodded. Yeah, just a long day. He didn't ask any more questions. I could have told him, could have said, I met a man today. And for the first time in years, I felt seen. But I didn't. Because I knew that meeting Ethan was just the beginning, and I wasn't ready to stop. I should have walked away. After that coffee meeting with Ethan, I told myself I wouldn't let it go any further. But the problem with temptation is that once you've tasted it, it lingers on your tongue, making you crave more. I started looking forward to our chats, the little glances in the school hallway, the accidental, or maybe intentional, brush of his hand against mine. And then, One evening, when I thought I had control over the situation, I lost it completely. A week later, I found myself driving to a place I shouldn't have been, a small boutique hotel on the quieter side of town. My hands were shaking as I parked, my breathing shallow as I stepped out of the car. And then, as if drawn by fate, I saw him, standing outside, waiting for me, our eyes locked. No words were needed. We both knew why we were there. Ethan took a step toward me, and suddenly, everything felt inevitable. The moment the door to the hotel room closed behind us, silence filled the space. A thick, heavy silence charged with everything we had been holding back. I turned to face him. "Ethan, But before I could finish, he was there. His hands on my waist, his breath warm against my skin, and then his lips were on mine. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't slow, it was raw, desperate, filled with weeks of restraint finally breaking apart. My fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer. My body pressed against his, melting into the hunger, the need. For the first time in years, I felt wanted. Truly, utterly desired. Hours later, as I lay beside him, my skin still tingling from his touch, the reality of what I had done hit me like a wave. I had crossed the line. No more innocent texts. No more harmless coffee dates. I had betrayed my vows. I sat up, covering myself with a sheet, my heart pounding in my chest. "Ethan, He reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "Don't say it was a mistake," he murmured. "But wasn't it? Wasn't it the biggest mistake of my life? Then why did I feel so alive?" I left that hotel room with trembling hands, guilt pressing down on my shoulders. But as I drove home, I found myself glancing at my phone, waiting, hoping. And when Ethan's name lit up my screen, my stomach flipped. And just like that, I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. The guilt followed me everywhere. At home, I watched Mark move around the house, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. He still kissed my cheek before work, still asked about my day. But I can see it. The routine, the absence of curiosity in his eyes. He didn't notice the way I flinched when he touched me. He didn't notice how I avoided long conversations. And maybe that was the saddest part of all. I had betrayed him, and yet he didn't even realize I was slipping away. One night turned into two. Two turned into more than I could count. Ethan and I didn't talk about the affair like it was something wrong. It just was. An escape, a secret world where I could feel alive again. I would leave our meetings flushed and breathless, my body alight with sensations I hadn't felt in years. But every time I returned home, reality hit me like a slap. This couldn't last forever. And deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before everything crashed down. It was a Saturday afternoon when it happened. Mark and I were sitting in the living room, Emily playing on the floor, cartoons humming in the background. My phone buzzed, and without thinking, I picked it up. His name flashed on the screen. "Ethan." Before I could react, Mark's eyes flicked to the phone. He didn't say anything, but something shifted in his expression. A pause. A slow, deliberate inhale. "Who's Ethan?" My stomach twisted into a knot. "Think, Juliet. Think." "He's, Emily's teacher," I said too quickly, setting the phone down like it was burning my fingers. "He probably just needed to discuss something about school." Mark's gaze stayed on me a second too long, and I knew. He didn't believe me. That night, after Emily was asleep, Mark stood in the bedroom doorway, arms crossed. "Tell me the truth, Juliet." My heart pounded. "What do you mean?" He took a slow step forward. "You've been different, distant. And now you're getting personal messages from our daughter's teacher? I swallowed hard. Mark, Are you having an affair? The words hung in the air between us, thick with accusation and pain. I could have lied. I could have denied it, blamed my mood swings on stress, on exhaustion, on anything but the truth. But I was too tired. Tired of sneaking around. Tired of pretending I wasn't drowning in guilt. So I did the only thing I could. I nodded. Mark's face twisted into something I had never seen before. Anger, betrayal, heartbreak all mixed together. How long? He asked, his voice strained. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. How do you explain that you never meant for it to happen? That it wasn't just about desire, but about feeling alive again? I'm sorry, I whispered. Mark let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Sorry? Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. And in that silence, I knew. This was the beginning of the end. Mark didn't yell. He didn't throw things. He just walked away. For the next few days, he barely spoke to me. Then, one evening, he handed me a piece of paper, a list of options, a separation agreement, a choice. I stared at it, my chest tightening. This wasn't a moment of forgiveness. This wasn't a second chance. It was a door. And Mark was giving me the choice to walk through it or fight to keep it closed. But could I fight for a marriage that had already slipped through my fingers? As I sat alone in our bedroom that night, my phone buzzed again. Ethan. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. I could answer. I could choose him. Or I could finally face the damage I had done and try to rebuild my life. With a deep breath, I made my choice. I deleted the message, and then, slowly, painfully, I blocked his number. Because some mistakes, no matter how thrilling, are never meant to last.